Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, joining us on a Thursday evening in Malaysia. I'm Ken Dunstan Kundaya from Sabah, Papar. I'm currently in United Kingdom, London. Familiar with London? I'm in Richmond, West London. I've been in the UK for a while, but I just been back in KL as well for the last 3 months. It's been a tremendous experience. I just missed the whole election. So today, as we know, the 2020 Malaysian general election, or GE15 or PRU15, was held on a Saturday, 19th of November, to elect the 222 parliamentary members, the Dewan Rakyat, in the 15th Parliament of Malaysia. That resulted in a hung parliament, as we know, with Pakatan Harapan, 82 seats, Pakatan Nasional, 74, and BN 30, that resulted in a hung parliament. I will not elaborate too much on this. We want this webinar or seminar to be very crisp and concise. And I like to invite, we have several speakers today. We have Professor Dr. James. We have Dr. Arnold and also Mr. Philip as speakers. We do have another speaker, Mr. Adrian, but he just messaged us that he is actually stuck in a downpour on the way back home. So we may not have him as a speaker, but that's okay. So briefly about Borneo Forum first. Borneo Forum started several years ago, actually, more of a meetup in London, and then it transitioned into an online forum. And we've been doing this for the last, since early 2020, actually. So this is our online version since we stopped meeting in London. And the objective of the forum is really to provide a platform for us to get together, not so seriously, almost informal, more a friendly approach, but provide a platform for us to connect, to make friends, not only Sabah and Sarawak, but also Brunei, Labuan, Kalimantan, all the 5 provinces. It's really for the whole Borneo people to connect, interact, and eventually form friendships, partnerships, network, and business endeavors, and all that. We are non-political, but we do discuss political topics without being political. Hence why the speakers today are primarily neutral speakers, and not party leaders, many academics, and we decidedly, intentionally did that. Yeah. So this is what Borneo Forum is. Going forward next year, we are changing our Borneo Forum format. There are going to be only 4 sessions a year for Borneo Forum. In between, we're going to have a Borneo talk, which one-to-one, almost like a podcast style, inviting unknown leaders, unsung heroes from Borneo. They've done some tremendous thing for Borneo that unknown. So this is our intention to be one of our niche of, making known all these leaders and contributors to Borneo, that unknown, unsung heroes. It's just one of angle. And our Vice President, Richard Punai, will be mainly leading the Borneo talk. So we'll be very much looking forward to that, Richard. It's going to be such an exciting, less pressure because we have 1-to-1 or maybe even 1-to-2, not a big number of speakers. Now, to kick off our topic today, post-PRU15 in review, new Prime Minister, new focus, new Malaysia, what are the impacts and implication on Sabah and Sarawak? We have as our first speaker, none other than Professor Dr. James Chin, a very well-known expert in Asian studies. Dr. James Chin is Professor of Asian Studies, University of Tasmania. He is widely known as the leading scholar on the contemporary Sabah and Sarawak affairs. His work, you can search them on researchgate.net, and he's always on the panel of news briefings and all that. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor James to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken, and a very good evening to everyone. So I'll try to be very brief because there are many other speakers after me, and I'll just look at the implications for Sabah and Sarawak in terms of this GE15. I hope you all can see my slides. Okay, in terms of the contents, I'm basically going to speak on 6 topics, which I think has a direct implication for Sabah and Sarawak. The first is obviously everyone has been talking about it, the share of Sabah and Sarawak representatives in the new Malaysian cabinet under Anwar Ibrahim. Then I'll speak a bit about the opposition in Sabah and Sarawak. And of course, item number 3, you can't run away from the MA63 issues. The 4th part is on the Borneo block. Again, a lot of people are talking about it. Then I'll say a bit about the next state elections that's coming out in Sabah and Sarawak. And the final item is about what we call the green wave, where PAST has made major gains in the recent PRU15. So item number 1, what did Sabah and Sarawak gain in terms of government appointments? So if you look at just the figures along, you can sort of make a very simple chart. Basically, representatives from Sabah and Sarawak ended up with 7 ministers, 7 full ministers, and out of the total of 28 ministries or ministers, that's a healthy 25%. So this 25% is also equal to the number of seats held by Sabah and Sarawak in the current parliament or Dewan Rakyat. But the big change this time is, of course, DPM2, Deputy Prime Minister 2, was given to somebody from Sabah and Sarawak, and in this case, it was given to Representative from Sarawak, Fadila Yusof, who is the first Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia from the Borneo states. He also holds concurrent ministerial status, and he's in charge of plantation and commodities. In terms of the other 4 ministers, you got Nancy Shukri, Alex Lingi, and these 2 have served as full ministers before in the previous government. The 2 new ministers you find from Sarawak is Tiong King Sing from PDP, a small party. He got tourism, and Ara Gagan, who's looking after national unity. So that's the Sarawak contingent. In terms of Sabah, there's only 2 ministers from Sabah. Ewan Benedict for APCO, who got entrepreneur development, and of course Amizan Ali, who got Sabah and Sarawak affairs, or basically the minister who's supposed to look after MA63 issues. So these 2 are completely new appointments. They never served in the federal cabinet before. So it's quite interesting that in terms of Sarawak, 2 of them are new, but in Sabah, both of them are completely new. Now, in terms of the deputy ministers, it's quite interesting. This time, the deputy ministers, almost half of them are actually from Sabah and Sarawak. I don't want to read through the list. You can see on the screen. But this is a major uptake compared to all the 3 or 4 cabinets going all the way back to 2008, when Sabah and Sarawak issues became a top issue. So this is quite interesting that Anwar Ibrahim has sort of top-heavy appointed the deputy ministers from Sabah and Sarawak. But of course, the big story here is that Sarawak DAP is totally not represented. And the reason why Sarawak DAP is not represented was because this was a request for the GPS in Sarawak that in terms of the ministers and deputy ministers' position in cabinet, there will be no representatives from Sarawak DAP. So what we have now is that basically the contingent from Sabah and Sarawak, in terms of cabinet appointments, they are the biggest since independence, since 1963. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, one of the deputy prime ministers is actually from Sabah and Sarawak. Now, a lot of people actually got very excited with the huge numbers, but I have to remind all of you that this is actually just the start of the process, because the government itself has about 3,000 positions on government bodies, statutory boards, GLCs, all these things. So there is a lot more positions that Anwar can appoint Sabahans and Sarawakians to. So, it's very difficult to keep track, but normally some of the high profile ones we will know very, very soon. This does not include, again, the list of senior Sabah and Sarawak civil servants. A lot of these people can be bumped up, so to speak, if the new government wants to do it. Again, this has not changed yet. So hopefully with the heavy contingent of ministers and deputy ministers from Sabah and Sarawak, they will push for more senior civil servants, especially at the executive level, the PTD level, from Sabah and Sarawak. In terms of the House of Parliament, if you remember during Najib's time, the Speaker and the two deputies were both from the Borneo states. This time in the Dewan Rakyat, only the Deputy Speaker comes from Cebu, at least. The other two, the Speaker and the other Deputy Speaker, comes from Malaya. So politically, I think it's not too bad. I think even though Sabah and Sarawak, in terms of the numbers in government, is not that large, we actually got more in terms of percentage compared to the actual number of Sabah Sarawak MPs in Parliament. So it is really up to the representative now to do their job to protect the interests of Sabah and Sarawak. Second item I want to talk about is, of course, the opposition. I think this is a real key issue. One of the outcomes of this election is that we are left with no real opposition in both Sabah and Sarawak. If you look at all the parties, Pakatan Harapan, GPS, GRS, Barisan Nasional, UMNO, all of them are now part of the federal government. You only have basically one Bersatu fellow in Sarawak, one Bersatu fellow in Sabah, who are the real opposition. So now going forward, I think we really have to look at a situation where, although all the parties in Sabah and Sarawak, the mainstream party, are in the federal government, at the state level, it may be different, right? So the state level in Sarawak, Pakatan Harapan is still the opposition. And in Sabah, the Pakatan Harapan in Sabah is also not part of the state government, even though they want to be part of the state government. I suspect the situation will not change. So the answer to the last question is that I doubt very much until the next state elections that Pakatan Harapan will be accepted as part of the state government in both states. Now, when it comes to MA63 and related issues, we do know that the Prime Minister Anwar has been making a lot of positive noises, saying that he will try to resolve as many issues as possible. One of the things which I thought was the most interesting thing was that he actually announced to the press that he'll put the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of MA63 affairs to sort out the issue, to quote him. This is interesting to me because then the question is that what is the role of the Minister for Sabah and Sarawak Affairs? Because in all the previous administration, it was the Minister for Sabah and Sarawak Affairs that looked after MA63 issues. So one way, a positive way of looking at it is that both of them are working towards the same goal. But we do know that it's very difficult for ministers to work if they don't have a complete control over their portfolio. So we do not know how they're going to share their work. But as speaking as somebody from Sarawak, I'm sure all of us are hoping that they'll come to some sort of agreement and push through and try to sort out this matter as soon as possible. So what are the sort of things that we can expect in the short run? I think it is quite clear that we can expect more decentralization. The federal government, especially Anwar, doesn't want to deal with a lot of the bottlenecks that we face in the last few administrations. So in terms of Sarawak, Sarawak will definitely get more decentralization in terms of health and education services. Sabah, they sort of hasn't really gone to the federal government and say what they want in terms of decentralization. But I think they're also looking for decentralization on things like, power, the ports and all that sort of things. I think the thing that we can expect, which will be sorted out fairly quickly, is of course the 40% that was promised in MA63 to Sabah. I think that is very likely to happen very, very soon, but it is not what people think. If people think that the federal government is going to pay the 40% one lump sum payment, backdated, that's not going to happen because the federal government does not have that kind of money. So it is very likely that going forward, they will have an agreement that Sabah will probably get the 40%. Again, there's a lot of issues about how to calculate the 40%, but it will be done in stages, especially in terms of the money going to Sabah. The other thing, of course, is that people are looking to increase the number of parliamentary seats from Sabah Sarawak to 1/3, but I think that is very unlikely for the next 2 years. People are also talking about constitution amendments to protect the rights of Sabah and Sarawak, again, I would argue that this is not a priority for the Anwar government, not at least for the next 2 years. I think they're looking for political stability, and something like this that is highly, highly controversial, I don't think they'll do it, not at least for the next 2 years. The big issue is, of course, the Petroleum Act 74 and who owns the continental shelf. Again, on these key issues, I don't think they can resolve it. So I suspect the closest they will do is that they will do a CCA with both states, and all the Petronas activities, commercial activities in Sabah and Sarawak will be transferred to the state oil company in both Sabah and Sarawak. I think that's doable. They've done a lot of that with Petros in Sarawak, and I don't see them stopping this work. So I think in terms of Sabah and Sarawak benefiting from the PDS 74, I don't think the issue going forward will be the 5% royalty. It will be all about benefiting from the Petronas commercial activities in Sabah and Sarawak. Now, the other thing that people keep talking about is, of course, the Borneo block. In theory, the Borneo block, upwards of 25% of parliament. It was heavily discussed during the elections in Sabah when I was there during the campaign. In fact, GRS took out a full-page advertisement. I'm sure you all saw it, talking about that GRS looks towards the GPS model as the Sabah version of GPS, and that they'll join up with Sarawak GPS and they'll form the Borneo block. I think that is not likely to happen, but I think the only possible thing that they can do in the short term is some sort of informal Borneo block between GPS, GRS, and independents, and that will give them about 31 seats. A formal Borneo block, I don't think will happen very, very soon because of the low level of trust between the political leaders of Sabah and Sarawak. I think a much better way in terms of confidence building trust between the political leaders of Sabah and Sarawak is actually to have a joint approach over the MA63 issues. I think the public will be very, very surprised to hear that when I said that so far, since 2008, 2009, the approach for MA63 is actually a three-way process between Putrajaya, Kota Kinabalu, and Kuching. And therefore, whatever reasons, again, the low level of trust, the Sabah and Sarawak government actually do not approach the topic on the same page. Now, quickly moving on to the state elections. As many of you know, the Sarawak state elections is due in 2026. So in theory, if Anwar hangs on to government, basically it means that you can evaluate the performance of the Pakatan Harapan government. They'll be in power for 4 years. That's assuming Anwar can hang on, 4 years until 2026. What is likely to happen in Sarawak is very, very obvious to me, that it will be GPS versus the rest. In other words, the competition you saw in 2021 will be similar. It will be GPS versus Pakatan Harapan versus the state parties and versus all other parties who are not part of GPS. I don't think there is any possibility of some sort of agreement at the state level between Pakatan Harapan and GPS, unlike the federal part. The other thing that is very clear to me is that I don't expect early elections, i.e. before 2026, because I think the situation in Sarawak is quite stable. This is not true for Sabah. I would argue that in Sabah, it is very likely that you get an early election, even though elections are not due until 2025. And that is after 3 years of the federal government. I think for the coming state election, I think you will have the same divide that you saw in 2020. The big difference is I think Warisan will not join out anybody. They'll stand alone again. So it'll be very much Pakatan Harapan versus GRS. If they break up with Barisan, it'll be GRS versus Barisan versus Perikatan versus Warisan. So again, the Sabah politics that we saw in the recent general elections will be repeated. In other words, it'll be very, very messy. I think in terms of stability in Sabah, Sabah's political stability is really tied to the political stability at the federal level. So you can see when things happen at the federal level, shortly after that, something happens in Sabah. So coming back to the federal government, I think 3 things over the next 12 to 15 months is really, really important to stabilize the government. The Pakatan Harapan government at the federal level will really have to revive the economy. Secondly, they have to win big in the 2023 6 state elections that will be coming out in the Peninsula Malaysia. And thirdly, I think they have to watch carefully the Zahid trial. So for example, if Zahid is found guilty, I think that will create major political instability in the coalition or the current makeup of the government. So finally, I want to say a bit about the so-called green wave. I think a lot of people are very worried because PAS is now the biggest bloc in parliament, 43 seats. The big question for me is not whether the green wave is real or not. It is whether PAS and Bersatu Perikatan Nasional can repeat their performance in 2023 in the 6 state elections that's coming up. Because there are lots of people who argue that they can't repeat the performance because what happened in this recent election was that it wasn't that UMNO was doing badly. It was because most of the people who voted for Perikatan or PAS were protest votes. They were not happy that Zahid was in charge of UMNO. And also UMNO replaced too many warlords. So it was more of UMNO losing rather than PAS and Bersatu winning. Now, the reason why this is really, really important for people in Sabah and Sarawak is because if PAS can repeat this performance, for example, out of the 6 states, if it can win 4 or 5, only 1 state goes to Pakatan Harapan, then their supporters, especially in Sabah, will be emboldened. PAS doesn't have a very strong presence in Sarawak, as far as I'm aware. They only are strong in one particular constituency for local factors. But in Sabah, interestingly enough, they do have some support, especially among the migrant population. So if PAS does very well on the other side of Malaya, this will embolden their supporters in East Malaysia. This is crucially important because I'm sure we all agree, and PAS says it openly, it doesn't believe in multiculturalism, okay? And multiculturalism is the bedrock of Sabah and Sarawak's political culture. But PAS does not believe in that. So what we have now after these general elections is that we have a country that is divided into 3 different narratives of what Malaysia is, right? In rural Malaya, you have the narrative that Malaysia is an Islamic Malay country, Ketuanan Melayu Islam. And that's the reason why we have the green wave in the rural Malaya. In urban Malaya, Klang Valley, Kinta Valley, Penang, all those places, basically Pakatan Harapan won and they won big. So these are the people who believe in a Malay-led Malaysia that is plural and secular. But the problem is that in Sabah and Sarawak, people here strongly believe in a secular state and a multicultural state, which doesn't sit with PAS at all. So the question is, what is Malaysia? Okay, but the bigger question that I think this election throws out is what is the role of Islam in public space? Because very recently, a senior leader of Perikatan Nasional actually went public and said that the political system of Malaysia must be based on Islam. Now, this is very surprising because everybody knows that when the constitution was brought in 1963, it was very clear that Malaysia was a secular state. Islam was the religion of the federation, not the official religion. So my final word is that this general election was a huge failure in 2 ways. One was because the voters did not select a clear winner. This is very true of Malaya and very true of Sabah. And this created political instability and forced the royals to get involved. It is very, very clear that Anwar Ibrahim was anointed by the Malay rulers to form a government. He wasn't elected by the people. Secondly, the rise of PAS meant a fundamental challenge to the existing political structure. As I mentioned, PAS wants to change the fundamental character of secular Malaysia. And this, of course, if they win next year's state election, will lead to more political instability. So the bottom line is that if federal politics is not stable, you cannot expect political stability, especially in Sabah, but Sarawak will be affected as well. So therefore, I think it's quite clear that the less Sabah and Sarawak are influenced by peninsular politics, the better it is for the people of Sabah and Sarawak. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Dr. James. Yes, thank you, Dr. James, for the comprehensive coverage what happened in the last GE election. And I found that it's very interesting that it raises more questions in the minds of the audience rather than what. There's so many things to think about because a lot of things that is very new. And what I gathered from the sharing from Dr. James is that the number one is that the in regards to the Borneo bloc, I think Sabah and Sarawak really have to see eye to eye on many things and then come together so can unite. And the other thing that was also mentioned is about Sabah. And it's true what Dr. James has said that in Sabah, the political parties are not as united as you see in Sarawak. And that is something we have to get together on the Sabah side. And I particularly like the end of the presentation of Dr. James, as he was saying that what is Malaysia? What is Malaysia is something that we all have to understand because we have been a free country since 60 over years, and yet what is Malaysia is not very clearly defined because we all have three different narratives from, Sabah, they have their own narrative, Sarawak, and Federal also, they have their own narrative. So that's something very interesting. Thank you, Dr. James. I think we will leave the question and answers questions to the end of the once all the presentations given, we address that one. And my name is Raymond. Okay, I'm from Labuan. I am a local boy in Labuan, a small island next to a big island. And it's give me great pleasure for me to introduce the next presenter, that is Philip Golingay. Now, he's no stranger to Borneo Forum. Now, Philip Golingay is a news editor with Star Media Group in Malaysia. He's also a coordination editor with Asia News Network and Alliance 24 News Organization in Asia. Now, he writes 2 columns for the Star. It's just politics and one man's speed. So I would like to invite Philip Golingay in his presentation about, is a Sabah bloc possible? Over to you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much. It'll be, I'm looking forward to this session. First of all, I would like to talk about 3 issues. Issue number 1 will be on the Borneo bloc, that I'll talk very briefly. Then I'll talk about the Sabah bloc. And because I'm Sabahan, I'll talk about Sabah politics in the next 6 months. Okay, first of all, why do we talk about bloc? Bloc is because of this peribahasa, bersatu teguh, bercerai rubuh, meaning we need to be united. If we are united, we'll be stronger. But if we are broken up, we are fragmented, therefore we are not a force to be reckoned. So that's the idea behind the Borneo bloc. That is the 31 MPs from Sarawak, and then just say 25 from Sabah, and then hopefully Labuan, Raymond's Island, that is extra 1. Kan? So that's the Borneo bloc. The Borneo bloc is that we can talk as 1, 31 plus 25 plus 1. Okay. So do we have a Borneo bloc? A few political parties before the during G15 campaign, they were talking about the Borneo bloc. So I've seen like some Sabah parties saying that, yes, we are going to form a Borneo bloc with GPS. Then in my mind, I was thinking, yeah, that's just rhetoric because it will not happen. Because for me, the political reality is very simple. Yes, maybe Sabahan politician, we dream that, okay, with Sarawak, with the Sarawak MPs, we can form the Borneo bloc. But from my understanding of Sarawak politician, talking to them, going to Sarawak, etc., what Sabahan think that what Sarawakian thinks of us is really different actually. We think that they're our neighbor and therefore they think of us as one. I was a bit shocked when I was there several times that if Jesse, this is just if Jesse Sarawak goes for independent, they will not bring Sabah along actually. They actually see their state or their territory, now it's called territory, as a big country on its own, and they will go on. And they don't really have much affinity to Sabah actually. Although if you meet Sarawakians, like maybe in Peninsula or even in even in Sarawak or even Sabah, they're like, okay, we are still close because we are part of Borneo. We have some certain identity or certain geography that we share. But in reality, political reality, they see themselves as their own. So in terms of Borneo block, I think GPS is the Sarawak block, and they will think of them. They will focus on what they want. And for Sabah, that's another story. So for me, I think Dr. James, Professor James also mentioned Borneo block. He said not too soon. For me, yes, I agree. Actually, not too very soon even, or it will be in some time. Okay, so now I want to talk about the Sabah block. The thing with the Sabah block is even as we went into G15, when you look at the parties that are contesting, they were big parties or coalition. For example, it was the BN/GRS versus Pakatan Harapan versus Warisan. They are already technically how many? Three blocks actually against each other. And then we could already predict that the result will not favor one big coalition or one big party. The prediction was that it will be fragmented. And then you knew already, if it's a fragmented result, technically there won't be any Sabah block. So we look at the seats that the parties won in Sabah. Barisan Nasional, they won 7. And then GRS, they won 6. Pakatan Harapan won 5. Warisan 3. Parti KDM technically won 1 + 1, so it's 2, and then an independent one. So even when you look at this number, nobody has that big number. The biggest number is 7, then 6. It's unlike in Sarawak. For example, in Sarawak, it is 23 out of 31 with GPS 1, and therefore they can speak as one. Whereas in Sabah, it's fragmented. Okay, so technically, we do not have a Sabah block just because of this fragmentation of our MPs. And then why do we do not have this Sabah block? I would like to quote Masidi Manjun, one of our ministers in Sabah. This is what he said when Sabahans were complaining that, oh, why we only have 2 ministers, whereas Sarawak has 5. And then I'll read to you what he said. He said something like, what did he say? Masidi. He said, Sabah politicians have only themselves to blame after Anwar chose only 2 Sabah ministers to be in his cabinet. He said Sabah politics was too fractious, with politicians trying to outdo each other instead of being united. Yeah, that's very Sabahan. And then he said, for as long as I can remember, we have always been fighting with each other. We are very fractious. We do everything except to be united. And then he said, compared to Sarawak, to us to Sarawak, the reason they got 5 ministers is because they are united. Why don't we Sabahan learn something from them? I'm sure there's more reason for us to be united than fractious. I think the word that I learned actually when I covered the election when I was in Kota Marudu is bergigit. So I think that's it describes Sabah politician actually. We're always bergigit. It's like 2 or 3 or 4, actually 3 or 4 or 5 dogs actually fighting each other. They always bergigit. They cannot be united. So that's our main problem. And then based on the numbers of Professor James spoke about the numbers, 24 out of 25 of the Sabah MPs are with the Anwar government. There's only one opposition, that is Beluran, Ronald Kiandi. But it's just an illusion. It looks like 24 MPs are with the government, therefore we are united. But the problem is we are not united. Because the thing with our MPs is they speak on behalf of their party, or they speak on behalf of their self-interest. They don't speak as one. The 24, even plus 1 from Beluran, 25, they don't speak as one unit. So therefore we are not united. So I'll quote Masidi again. He said, the problem is we are more concerned about trying to outdo each other, trying to pull each other down rather than uniting and doing something good for Sabah. You reap what you sow. So I'll translate what he said. what he says is that famous ketam mentality. It's like we're in a bucket, the ketam wants to go out. When one ketam go up, the other ketam will bring down, then the other one to go up will bring down. So that's our problem actually, it's the ketam mentality. And then the other problem with Sabahans also is that we have this mentality where almost everybody wants to be Ketua Menteri, or everybody wants to be Ketua Kampung. So the problem is they will fight each other. Even at the moment, while we're talking now, there are politicians in Sabah who are trying their utmost best to be the next Sabah Chief Minister. Actually, that is what they are planning. So from the talks that I have with certain politicians, there are moves actually for them to be the next Sabah, to oust Hajiji as the Sabah Chief Minister, and for them to become Sabah Chief Minister. So that's our ketam mentality. That ketam is already there, then somebody will try to pull down. Okay. So at the moment, like I said, there is a political game, and my advice to politicians when I met them lately in Sabah is you better prepare for election within 6 months. That's my advice. Although our election, Sabah poll is supposed to be, the term is supposed to end around 2025. That is another, just say 2 years plus. But for me, is I'll give them 6 months. 6 months to prepare. Okay, so you'll ask me, Phil, why do you say give them 6 months? It's because, like what I said, there are people who are still dreaming, or they really want to be Ketua Kampung. They really want to be Ketua Menteri. So they will make moves in order to bring down this government. But when you look at this present government, it looks like it's secure, because out of this is what they claim. They claim that out of these 79 assemblymen, it's actually 73 plus, no, 79, yeah? 73 assemblymen plus 6 nominated assemblymen, so it's 79. So they claim they have 57. But the scary thing is, just say they have 57, you minus 57, you minus 17. If 17 assemblymen leave them, the government will fall. And then knowing Sabahan, I just look at the parties that are they are like, out of the 57, they are Barisan, they are GRS, and then even like GRS, they are split actually. They are PBS with 7, Star with 6. Now it's no longer Bersatu, now it's GRS with 15 GRS itself, and then they are split. And then there are parties that can maybe pull assemblymen to join them. And then even though Pakatan Harapan with 7 assemblymen, they've pledged to Hajiji that they'll support him until his term ends. And then the reason is quite simple actually. The reason was that they don't want other people to become Chief Minister. They prefer Hajiji because Hajiji is a much more, to use the word, a nicer guy. They were a bit worried about the next Chief Minister. So PH at the moment, they prefer Hajiji to be Prime Minister and Chief Minister until his term ends. Okay, so that's the thing with Sabah. And then the other talk that what I've heard is that in the state assembly that is middle of next month in January, the Sabah state government might introduce, they will have a bill to allow 2 extra ministers, because at the moment the Sabah constitution only allow 10 ministers. And then if this happen, that 2 minister posts in the Sabah cabinet will be quite an interesting thing. It's like a bait for assemblymen to be with this current government. However, today Hajiji have said that no, there's no move. Okay, and then the other last month's time is because the power that be in Sabah, most probably they prefer to have a state election where there is no federal interference. So if just say it's a Sabah election and it's in 2025, it's most probably a standalone election. It's only Sabah going. So if you have that election, you have KL people coming in from different parties, etc., influencing. So there's one school of thought in Sabah to call for the election when the 6th state election of Selangor, Penang, Negeri Sembilan, Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu are held, and then Sabah might call for election. So I think we should be prepared. Maybe 2020, maybe 2023, that is next year, we might have an election. So yes, that's all I wanted to say. And that's the thing about Sabah. It's too fragmented. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Philip. Fantastic. What a in-depth analysis. Obviously, as your job as a journalist has privy to all this. And as you say, Sabah being so disunited, it's nowhere in a position at the moment as a bloc. But we look forward to more questions on your presentation. So many things I've jotted down here. And I'll probably leave the question later because it provokes so many thoughts here. And it's better for me to introduce the next speaker, and then we come back into a question answer later. So the next speaker is Dr. Arnold Puvok. Dr. Arnold is currently the Deputy Dean and Senior Lecturer in Political and Government Studies at the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities in University Malaysia Sarawak, or UNIMAS. His PhD is in Political Science, and he's also a founding member of the Global Research Network on Comparative Territorial Autonomies based in the Academy of Hong Kong Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong, and a distinguished fellow in International Strategy Institute. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Arnold to present his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Can you hear my voice and my slides? Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much, Ken, for that introduction. Very good evening, everybody. Good evening to my fellow panel members, Professor James, my friend Philip, and everybody who is in this forum. The title of my presentation is Sabah and Sarawak in Malaysia's Changing Political Landscape. So basically what I'm going to say is very much similar to what James and Philip have just presented. So basically, we all know why Sabah and Sarawak are important when we want to discuss Malaysian politics, because we all know in terms of culture, in terms of politics, demography, geography, we are quite distinct. We are not the same with Peninsular Malaysia. That is why in any attempt to analyze Malaysian politics, it is important that we look at Sabah and Sarawak as a separate case study. Not only that, because as mentioned by James and also by Philip, the role of the local elites is also very important for us to look into. But of course, there's a lot of factors, a lot of reasons to explain why Sabah's political elites are more fragmented compared to the Sarawak's political elite, which I will try to explain later. And again, as mentioned earlier, the issue of MS-63, whether we are like it or not, is very much prominent in the case of Sabah and Sarawak. So these are the points that I'm going to talk about this evening. But I will give my focus on changes in Malaysian politics since 2008. And right after that, I'm going to give my perspective on the role of Sabah and Sarawak in Malaysia's changing political landscape, and to give my key observation as well, moving forward, focusing on Sabah and Sarawak. We all know that these are the major players, but if you look at the graphic on the screen, we know that the position of GRS compared to GPS is quite unique. It's much more complicated. That's the reason why GRS made the decision to go on its own, and also the reason why Bersatu members in GRS made the decision to abandon Bersatu and to become direct members of GRS. It's a very unique position because the argument is that as long as they are under the federal influence, as long as they are part of Perikatan Nasional, they will not be able to win the support of Sabahan. That they say want a local-based party to support them, following the model of GPS in Sarawak. Even though I tend to disagree with such a view, I think in Sabah, it does not matter whether you are representing a peninsula-based or local-based party. I think the electorates in Sabah have a different mindset, have a different view towards this national versus local-based political parties. And we have seen this as early as 1991, especially after the entry of UMNO into Sabah politics. And this is the situation after GE15. And again, if we look at the so-called Sabah and Sarawak bloc described by Philip, we are all with the government now. I mean, especially with regards to the key political players in Sabah and Sarawak, they are part of the PH-led federal government. Well, when we talk about changes in Malaysian politics since 2008, again, I would like to describe this very, very briefly. We all know that BN's dominance in Malaysian politics ended in 2008 and 2013, especially when they were not able to win with more than 2/3 of the parliamentary seats. And in 2008, our country's politics moved into a different phase when we see a lot of political realignment, and scholars also consider this as a reconciliation because we see former enemies coming together, forming a strategic alliance. We also see the all elites making a comeback in order to remain in power. And but we also know that Pakatan Harapan only managed to survive after 22 months in power, when it was replaced by PN through what many call as the Sheraton move. You all can read this in Wikipedia in order to understand the real story behind the Sheraton move. There's a lot of description on this already on the internet, which I do not want to repeat. Again, PN's term at the helm was also short-lived, following the resignation of Muhyiddin Yassin, paving the way for BN to return to power in 2021 under Ismail Sabri. So this was right before we held our general election. We also know the story that there was no coalition that was able to win with a simple majority. That is why a coalition government had to be formed. For me, the King's decree for a unity government changed the whole scenario, because right after the decree, we see people from GPS, from GRS, changing their political alliance and political support to Anwar, which I think is a very interesting thing to see. We all know that in 2008 and 2013, Sabah and Sarawak played a very, very important role because they helped BN to remain in power, even though BN lost its 2/3 majority. But because BN in Sabah and Sarawak were quite influential then, they were able to help BN at the federal level to maintain its power. But we see that there is a huge change in Sabah and Sarawak politics, especially in 2018, when Sarawak BN lost half of its seats, paving the way for Pakatan Harapan to set foot into Sarawak politics. But at the state level, we know that GPS was very much in control. And also in 2018, Sabah BN lost to Warisan, but Warisan could only hold on to power until 2020, when it was defeated by Gabungan Rakyat Sabah in a step election. Now, what's the situation now in Sabah and Sarawak? We know that GRS is still in control. Warisan is the biggest opposition party at the state level. As I mentioned to you earlier, GRS wanted to cut ties with PN and become independent in Sabah. The reason why he wanted to do so because they believe that by doing so, they would be able to get the support of Sabahan, who wanted a local-based entity to represent them in Sabah. Again, as described by James, GRS has a smaller representation in the federal cabinet with only one ministerial post. In Sarawak, GPS is still very much in control. We all know that in 2021, GPS won 76 out of 82 seats, while the opposition only won six seats. And in the general election, it won 23 seats, making GPS the largest political bloc in East Malaysia. That is why GPS can afford to appear as a very strong and independent bloc compared to GRS. And that's also the reason why GPS has bigger representation in the federal cabinet with 5 ministerial posts and a deputy minister post from Sarawak. Now, I've been in Sarawak for almost 10 years, so that gives me the opportunity to see Sarawak politics as an insider, to talk to people here, even though I'm from Sabah, with a position of senior lecturer in Ibinimas. I had the opportunity to meet the people here, to meet the leaders, to talk to them. And even though I'm also at the same time doing a lot of work on Sabah politics, I managed to come up with some key observation. This is to compare between Sabah and Sarawak, because as described by Philip, Sabah's politics is very much fragmented, very much fractious compared to Sarawak politics. Now, how we can look at this in a comparative perspective is to look at Sabah and Sarawak from this from the following aspects. In terms of elite control, we all know that the elite in Sabah is relatively weaker. They are fragmented compared to Sarawak, where the elite is strong and they are quite solidified as well. In terms of the regional whole, Sabah is also very weak, even though a lot of people are trying to promote what they call as the Sabah identity or Sabahan identity. But I think because Sabah's politics is very much open compared to Sarawak, so this Sabah identity is much more diluted compared to Sarawak identity, which I think is much more intensive. That is why I think Adan Satem was quite successful in promoting Sarawak for Sarawakian in order to win the support of Sarawakians, which I think Abang Joe was also trying to do, and he did it quite well as well in trying to consolidate GPS's support in local politics. In terms of existence of contentious local issues in Sabah, there are many contentious local issues. These issues are not only contentious, but they are also very deep and divisive, especially on the issue of illegal immigrants. It seems like whoever is in power is not able to solve this problem once and for all. They came up with this Pas Sementara PSS, but then again, it was turned into a political issue. And right until today, we do not see any decisive decision, any solid issue introduced by the Sabah government to address this illegal immigrant. In Sarawak, I'm not saying that there are no issues. There are still many issues, but then I think GPS so far has managed to manage this issue. They managed to make sure that everyone is in the same, basically in the same boat. And the elites are trying very much they can to manage these local issues. In terms of control over key electorates in Sabah, the elites are not that successful, because when you look at the key electorates in the Kadazan Dusun and Malay Muslim Putra area, the support from these communities is basically quite divided, and they are basically spread across parties and candidates, compared to Sarawak, where GPS managed to basically control the support of the Malay, Melanau, and the Dayaks. In federal intervention, for me, it's more open in Sabah, and also more susceptible to federal intervention, federal interference. And why this cannot be reversed, because when you look at UMNO, for instance, that entered into Sabah politics in 1991, UMNO managed to strengthen its machinery, it managed to strengthen its support base. That is why if you look at Bersatu, I think Bersatu is basically UMNO in Sabah. Compared to Sarawak, I think Sarawak is more insulated. I call it insulated, less susceptible to federal interference. And that's the reason why the elites in Sarawak are capable of saying no to peninsular-based political parties. But it would be very interesting to see whether or not PN, there is a sole PN candidate in Sarawak. So it would be very interesting whether he would be able to use this to bring more, or to introduce more branches in order to spearhead PN in Sarawak. Now, so what are my key observations with regards to Malaysian politics and Sabah and Sarawak? I think what we see after 2008 is that after the fall of BN, I think the Malaysia will no longer see a single party dominance. That's number one. And what I also see is that our politics will be very much characterized by the politics of coalition building or coalition agreement. And it's also a very interesting thing to see, because when you look at the PH-led government, on the PH side, it looks like it is more multicultural compared to the opposition that is PN, that is Malay and Muslim dominated. And what is also interesting to see in the coming years is the role of the young people. Of course, we are not too sure yet whether the young people, whether the vote of the young people play a decisive role in swinging the support to PH or swinging the support to PN. But based on the little knowledge that we have, yes, the young people did play a significant role in changing the country's political landscape. In fact, if you look at the young voters in Sabah and Sarawak, most are basically coming from the age group of 30, 39, or 22 and 25 as well. For Sabah and Sarawak, since the federal government seems to be quite accommodative to Sabah and Sarawak, so the big question here is, are we going to see more autonomous Sabah and Sarawak? And it would also be very interesting to see whether or not the federal government would give more concession to Sabah and Sarawak. Yes, they give us some sort of control in terms of how we manage our gas, as announced recently. But would the PDA 1974 be amended, for instance, to transfer ownership over natural resources to Sabah and Sarawak? And would the 40% federal revenue be returned to the state governments, or they would come up with a revenue sharing instead, in order to replace our Sabah and Sarawak constitutional right. And again, it will be very interesting to see whether the devolution of power that is given to Sabah and Sarawak would lead to substantial restructuring of the Malaysian federal system. Are we going to see a federal system like what we see in the US or in Australia or even in Switzerland? So is Malaysia heading to that direction? A very, very interesting trend to see. And well, of course, a lot of people are quite excited with decentralization and devolution of power to Sabah and Sarawak. But I have my reservation, because even though in the literature, there's a lot of research linking decentralization and devolution to efficient and effective administration at the local level. But at the same time, there's also a lot of literature saying that more decentralization, more devolution of power would also contribute to more corruption and consolidation of local control at the state level. So which path are Sabah and Sarawak going to? We are not too sure. So hopefully we are going to the right path, but not to the wrong path. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arnold. That was a very thorough presentation. Information that was shared before and after the changing political landscape of the GE15. And also, you also mentioned highlight the different characteristic between the Sabah and Sarawak mentality when it comes to politics, and why there's so much difference. But from Dr. Arnold's presentation, that we also understand is one thing that is for sure is that coalitions is the only current way to form and stay in power. And if you look at the chart just now, they are so colorful with multi-coalitions, each having their own logos. And also he highlighted the Undi 18, the youth impact to national politics. And I think one of the interesting questions to ask is because this 18 years old to 39 youth segment could be easily influenced by those who control the social media platform. It could be, but because they are easily access to information at the press of their fingertips, right? So it's something that we need to, whoever that's in the future election, we need to look into this one. So it is my great pleasure to introduce the next speaker. Is Adrian Bani Selasimbang around? Is he here right now?
I think he's stuck in the flood or something.
Oh, he's still in the flood. So okay, over to you, Ken. What should we do now?
Yeah, he did message that he's stuck in the journey back home, and we will open the forum for question and answers. I had received several questions here before I go into the question sent directly to me. I like to invite other people to ask questions first. What a fantastic coverage. We were hoping for Adrian to be also contributing, but that's okay. We almost over an hour now, so we have good amount of time to cover question and answers. And go ahead, if anybody want to ask question, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah, okay. There's some question raised or comment raised in the chat by Saiful Safri, and he was saying, I'm having the view that GPS government is making less impactful achievement in their MS63 negotiation with federal, except requests on autonomy on education and health and LHDN representative. So apart from MS63, the pertinent thing is the 100% ownership of the oil and gas Sarawak. So he is very keen to know how we can make this happen. And he also asked, does PDA 74 or previous signed agreement of concession made by our past leaders make it hard for us to reclaim what is rightfully ours? That is the questions. And perhaps I would like to perhaps forward these questions to Professor James. What is your thought on this? Because he was you were mentioning about the PDA 74, Dr. James.
Okay, so thank you, Saifu, for asking a really important question. So in terms of the oil and gas ownership under the PDA 74, all oil and gas resources found in any territory or territorial part of the Federation is automatically owned by the federal government. And the Sarawak and Sabah government chief minister have actually signed up what a legal document called they vested the resources with Petronas. So legally, it is owned by Petronas. Now, the reason why this issue can never be resolved is because if, for example, you go to court and the court says that Sabah Sarawak are actually the owners of the oil and gas resources, right? Then what happened to the last 40 years since 74? So you're gonna create more legal problems. It's also, in practical terms, not possible for the federal government to turn around and say that we're gonna give these resources back to Sabah and Sarawak for very simple practical reasons. If you look at the Malaysian budget essentially consists of two items. One is the development budget. The other is what we call recurrent budgets, things like civil servant salary, all those things that you have to pay. In the Malaysian budget for the last 20 years, almost all the development budget, part of the budget, which is for building new things, that's actually the dividends generated by Petronas. So it is, if you were to ask the federal government to give the bulk of the oil and gas resources back to Sabah and Sarawak, this essentially means that the federal government has no money for development purposes. And also for the political side, it's also very difficult for the federal government to give the oil and gas back to Sabah and Sarawak, because people often forget that PDA was also signed with Kelantan and Terengganu. So they will immediately come and say that if you can give it back to Sabah and Sarawak, why can't you give it back to us? So there are all sorts of added on effects of PDA. So that's the reason why I think in terms of the thinking among the political leaders now is that we will leave the PDA alone, but we will instead deal with whether we can maximize our oil and gas activities in our states. So there is a sort of a unwritten agreement, what they call the CCA, the commercial thing that I showed on my slide just now, where all the downstream activities and business activities generated by Petronas in the state of Sarawak will go to Petros, and in Sabah will go to the Sabah National Gas Company. So that in itself will generate a lot of economic activities for the state itself, because what has been the constant complaint among the business community in Sabah and Sarawak is that Petronas have never really benefited the local population, local companies. So by vesting all these downstreaming activities onto a state-owned gas company, they will of course give priority for associated jobs to Sabah and Sarawak companies. People don't realize that there's big money to be made because it is not the money is not just in pumping the oil and selling the oil. They are associating, because a lot of money is spent actually on things like support services. When you pull out a rig in the middle of the South China Sea, somebody has to fly the crew out, somebody has to provide them with food, wash their uniform. All these things actually cost millions and millions of dollars. And of course, with oil and gas, right? Normally, most oil and gas companies around the world devote up to 1/3 of their capex to what they call exploration activities. So there is actually a lot of money to be made. It's a question of how do you structure the companies, and also whether there's enough capacity in Sabah and Sarawak to handle this sort of thing. So for example, in Sarawak, overnight after they set up Petros, I can name 2 oil companies that has tremendously doubled their annual turnover because they were given business. So the latest one in Sabah is that they've just signed an agreement with Petronas where the household gas thing will now be distributed by the National Gas Company of Sabah. So that to me seems to be a sort of a workable solution. It's not ideal, of course. It's not ideal because obviously the people of Sabah and Sarawak wants to own the oil and gas resources. But that in itself is just one part of the big picture, because the other big picture is that who owns the continental shelf? Because we know the next round of technology is that, you know, you can actually do deep sea mining. Now you can't do deep sea mining, but that will come very soon. So the question is that who owns the continental shelf? And that alone is also worth not billions, we're talking about trillions of dollars. So there is very high political stakes involved. So that's the reason why I argue that these sort of issues cannot be resolved, not in the short term. Well, certainly not in the term of this government. You can record me saying that. They can't resolve the PDA issue in these 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James. That was a very good explanation of the questions now. I think the next question would be good to be forward to Mr. Peter Golingai. So the question is by Hok Hui. It says, when and why did Malaysia split from 2 to 3 narratives? Islamization and Ketuhanan Melayu have always been synonymous until GE15. These 2 narratives were used interchangeably by PN, BN, and PAS after the aftermath of the Sheraton move. So what happened? So Peter, what is your take on this?
Peter is me, isn't it?
I feel sorry. I'm very sorry. Philip, I make the biggest blunder. Okay.
Actually, you didn't make a mistake. Actually, my IC has Peter also. Is my name.
That's
okay.
new to me
I
also.
didn't really understand that question. Now, what's the question again? How did it die? How did it what?
Split from 2 to 3 narratives. Early on, before the G15 was about Islamization and Ketuhanan Melayu.
Okay, then it split into what?
Then these 2 narratives were used interchangeably by BN, PN, and PAS after the aftermath of Sheraton move. So what happened? I think, is it still the same? I would say. Is it still the same?
I just answer, but I actually, Professor James spoke about this earlier, so maybe he should answer. But for me, it never split. UMNO has been using it since I was born, I think. So they have not split it. It's just that maybe even UMNO was using it during G15. It's just that UMNO has changed a bit now, because Bersatu is now UMNO 2.0, and UMNO can't talk much about Ketuhanan Melayu anymore because they have embraced the boogeyman of Ketuhanan Melayu, that is DAP. So I don't think there's a split in narrative. It's just that it has been, UMNO has lost that narrative. But PAS was using it, and Bersatu was using it in Peninsular Malaysia. That's what the reports that I was getting. Up north especially, it was a very racialized campaign actually. And maybe that contributed to the factor why Pakatan Harapan only won 1 seat in Kedah, because it was a very racialized campaign. So to answer that question, I don't think there was any, what's the word, replace, split or something. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. Ken?
Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed. I have several questions being sent to me directly, and not all of them are directly pertinent, but one of it is about leadership. Although it's quite obvious, do we need better leaders in Sabah? I think that's yes. But the question is, how do we produce this better leaders in Sabah? That's the question. Let's open anybody or the speakers to answer.
Can I answer first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I was talking to one of our top politicians in Sabah. So he was telling me the difference between Sabah and Sarawak. The main topic, we were talking about how Sabah can move forward. And then he said our main problem was, or is that we do not have many professionals in our GLC. For example, the bosses of our GLC, or even our top figures in the government, they are, how to say, I have to find a polite term, they are a bit dinosaur. The way they think, they don't want to move actually, they don't want to change. They're just comfortable with their position. That's all. And then the way he told me, this is a Sabahan who's involved in the government. So the thing with Sarawak is that they have professional, they have people who are go-getters, etc. And then they are very competent and they want to move. So the problem with the Sabah government is when we try to tap to our talent, we don't have the talent because the GLCs or even those people in the civil servants, not all, but some are dinosaurs. So that's the main problem actually why we can't move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes, this question actually arises mainly out of Dr. Arnold's presentation as well, Philip as well. And this is, I think, huge in terms of how Sarawak view us. And my own experience dealing with Sarawakian is that they really look down on us, Sabahans. And one of the main factor is because why did you allow the immigrants to take over your state? and that is the huge thing that just throw down, and we lost their respect out of that. Now, Dr. Arnold, you are right there from Sipitang in Sarawak, living this and knowing this issue. How do we even address this? How do we even overcome this, if it can be overcome in terms of as a major obstacle for our relationship with Sarawaks, and how do we go forward? And it is that bad the way we look at Sabahans, and mainly because of this issue as well. Do you agree with me, or do you have any other thoughts on that? And perhaps Philip and Prof. James as well can contribute to that. I think it's a very crucial issue, this whole 3 million people in Sabah. Thank you.
Yeah. Should I go first? Ken?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. At least in my experience here in Sarawak for almost 10 years, well, they don't look down on us, but at least when Orisan won the state election in 2020, so some Sarawakians that I met said that this is a new beginning to your state, because finally a local-based party led by Shafi Abdal managed to win, and hopefully with that Sabah can prosper, because now you have a local-based party to represent you. No more UMNO and things like that. But I do agree with Philip. You see, when we compare GPS and GRS and our leaders in Sabah, the same elites are in power for too long. Also in Sarawak, right? It's the same elite. But then at least what the elites here are doing right, I think, is because they know how to put the right people in crucial position. For instance, when you look at Petros, they put capable people there, and in some GLCs, like what Philip said, they put the right people there to run all these crucial agencies. That is why I think leadership is very important in Sabah. Of course, in Sabah, we have heard people saying, look at Singapore, look at Brunei, they are independent, they are autonomous and things like that. But I think being autonomous and being independent is one thing. But who are those leaders whom we put there to lead us? I think that's the problem. That is why, for me, the solution, I've always been saying this, the solution for Sabah, if we can't start with the current elites, let's start with the young leaders, the youth. There are a lot of them who are now very interested to join politics, but we don't give them a space. But at least if we don't give them a space in the political parties, we give them a space in the civil society movement. Start them by leading our NGOs, our civil society movements. So I think they are as capable as the current political elites to lead the state in the future.
Okay, I just want to say something very quickly. Actually, Ken, you use a word that I wanted to use, but I didn't use because I'm polite and I'm Sabahan. The word is actually look down, actually. That's the feeling that I get when I go to Sarawak. They kind of look down on our type of politics. So yes, just wanted to say that. But yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any further elaboration on how we go forward? I mean, it's almost impossible to say a solution because it's always politicized. The fact that the registration of immigrants, it's actually a proper way forward, but it's always been politicized. How do we break that? Whenever somebody proposed that, oh, it's going to be, and that's always going to be stopped, because I do believe registration of immigrants properly documented is a way forward. How do you think that can be broken? Anybody? Possibly Prof. James or anybody? This whole issue of immigrants and their documentations is always going to be our hindrance and always going to be politicized. Whenever a party or current government try to do something, it's always going to be stopped. And we are back into square one without any solution for the presence of the more than 3 million people in Sabah. If any commentary on that one?
I'll answer that question. I've been speaking to so-called the political class in Sabah for a very long time. I think the problem with PTI is that it cannot be resolved because their offspring have already spent a generation in Sabah. Regardless of whether they are IC holders or IMM or whatever, the reality is that their descendants or their offspring are 100% Sabahans. They're born and raised there. It's just that they don't have paper. That's number one. So that is problematic. The second problem you have in Sabah is that the political class in Sabah cannot resolve on what is the solution to deal with these people. And that's the reason why the federal government is always afraid of trying to register or create database about these people, because they are afraid that the political class, once they get hold of this information, right, then it becomes even more controversial. So I think it's important that the Sabah political class themselves come to agreement on what they want to do. It seems to me as an outsider, you have to really draw a line in the sand, saying that, you know, if you come across certain years, you are given Malaysian IC, you have not committed any crime, you have built a life in Sabah, then we probably will have to allow you to carry on living in Sabah. Because the reality, I'm talking about the practical reality, I'm not talking about the sentimental reality. The practical reality is that the Filipino side are not going to take these people back, because the Filipino side depends on who's in Malacanang. They may or may not recognize this group. And the other reason why they don't want this group to go back is because of security concerns in the Mindanao region. So the reality is that you will have this group of people in Sabah, but the Sabah political class cannot decide what is the way forward. So that's the reason why it ding dong here, ding dong there. Now, in the meantime, it's going to get even more complicated, because this new generation coming out are going to marry into the local population and they're going to create even more offspring. That's one thing. But what has been happening in the last 10 or 15 years is that increasingly the second generation of offsprings of these migrants, because a lot of them actually have real Malaysian ICs, it's just that they were issued illegally, but they are real ICs. A lot of them are actually inside the political class now. You only have to look at certain DUN members in the Sabah Assembly to know that these people are first generation, people, their parents came into Sabah illegally, but now they're YBs. So your political class itself already have elements of so-called offsprings of PTI. So the issue is that the Sabah political class themselves keep playing with this issue. What part of the reason is because Sabah politics has such a high turnover, and everybody knows that this issue is highly emotive. You can quote unquote fish for votes in this issue. So for example, it is a widely accepted across the political board in Sabah, right? One of the reasons why Warisan has never done well in the KDM community is because it is seen as a party PTI or pro-PTI party. Now, whether true or not, it doesn't matter, but this is what the KDM people believe in, right? So this is why I said that it is a vote issue. So that's why the political class cannot resolve this. Now, I'd like to say something about this thing called Sarawak looking down on Sabah. Okay, I can tell you, okay, not that I don't want to claim to be expert or anything, but I have spent years speaking to the the old Sarawak Barisan Nasional GBS people, right? I do not think that they look down on Sabahans. Sarawakians actually see Sabah as a land of opportunity, like a cowboy country. If you go to KK Sandakan, right, you go and look at some of the Chinese businessmen, especially in retail trade, most of them are from Sarawak, okay? So to say that you look down on Sabah, I don't think it's true. I think what is true is that they see Sabah as a cowboy country. The problem they have with Sabah is that they find it odd that in Sabah, two things. One is that the political class cannot handle something as simple as this foreign invasion, for lack of a better word, right? You allow these people to come in. That's number one. Secondly, they can't understand why is Sabah politics, after so many years, not institutionalized. It's still very personality-based, right? You look at 2020, the state election, right? 3 of the so-called political parties were led by an individual. He just latched on a party label to it. You know, one of them is the ex-foreign minister. I don't want to say a name, but we know who we're talking about, right? You can't distinguish him from his political party. So it's all very personality-based. And a lot of them don't understand why Sabah political development cannot go beyond the personality base. Sarawak has that, of course, in the 60s and early 70s. But in Sarawak now, basically for the major political parties, right, party label is becoming dominant rather than the individual. But in Sabah, in almost all cases, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. But even in urban areas in Sabah, a highly urbanized city like KK, I can tell you, personality is key. You get the wrong personality, there is no chance you can win. So that is my 2 cents. I don't think Sarawakians look down on Sabah. It's just that they cannot understand why Sabahans, for lack of a better word, right? The orang putih call it self-harm. You keep harming yourself. Rather than try to solve the problem, you want to do self-harm. Okay, thank you very much.
I agree, but you being polite, James. But I fully agree with you. I think the majority of the big development in KK are by Sarawakians. The promenade hotels and all that, all are by Sarawakians. You're right. And you're right to say as well, I don't think it's really a kind of a look down, but you just summarize it like, why did you allow this? It's just ridiculous, put it this way, and we couldn't solve it despite all these years. And this is going to be our major division, so to speak, because you say you're going to combine with Sabah, but then are you going to let all these immigrants now to Sarawak? That's always going to be the contention. No, we don't want that. Close our border with you. We're never going to join you, or you're never going to join us. I think that is the always going to be the perception on Sabah. Besides that, is there any other question being asked, Raymond?
Ken, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
So I think this question is all has been highlighted by the 3 panelists. Okay, the question is this: how does Anwar Ibrahim's unity government and the manner by which it has been formed impact upon the political process in Sabah and Sarawak?
I'd like to say something. The person who asked the question is actually a good friend of mine.
Okay, Ms. Jayam. So anyone want to what?
Okay.
Dr. Arnold, what is your thought on this?
I'm not sure if you're able to read that question, Dr. Arnold.
Yeah. What's the question again? It's in the chat box, right?
Yeah, it says, yeah.
Go ahead. Let me read that aloud. How does Anwar Ibrahim's unity government and the manner by which it has been formed impact upon the political process in Sabah and Sarawak moving forward?
Well, I think it is like a trend nowadays for both in Sabah governments to try to play along with the federal government, and this was basically started in Sarawak under Adan Satem. They believe in the fact that when they want to develop Sarawak, when they want to realize MS63, they cannot afford to be in the opposition, and it is in their best interest to be part of the federal government, whoever the federal government is. That is why when you look at Abang Jo, when you look at Adan Satem, as much as possible, they try to work closely with the federal government, because only by doing so can they get what they want, and also only by doing so they can realize MS63. I think this is also the same position taken by the state government of Sabah under GRS. Of course, initially it said that it supported the other side, but after the King's decree, after Anwar was announced as the Prime Minister, they decided to shift their support to support the PH-led government, because I think following DPS's footstep, they also believe that it's better for them to be with the federal government in order to develop Sabah. So I think in the years to come, this is the kind of strategic and pragmatic approach that both governments will take.
Okay, can I just add? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, first of all, Anwar's government is not unity government, but okay, let's not argue over that. I call it Pakatan Harapan-led government, but not unity government. In terms of Sabah, what I find is that, okay, Anwar now is Prime Minister. And then the Sabah politics is usually it follows who's the Prime Minister, and the power will gravitate towards the parties that are linked to the Prime Minister. So just say if we have we have a Sabah election soon, or maybe next year or 1 year or the following year, I suspect that Pakatan Harapan did not do that well in 2020, but that was plus Warisan. But when you look at PKR, you look at especially PKR, they didn't do that well. But the thing is, now that Anwar is the Prime Minister, and then Pakatan Harapan is the backbone of this government, you will see parties like UPCO, which did badly in the 2020 election, only winning 1 seat, and then you look at their performance, winning Tuaran and also winning Penampang, it looks like UPCO will be a force to be reckoned. They will win more than 1 seat, or they will win more because they are connected to the Prime Minister, and plus there's a wave in Sabah. I think the younger ones they are very inspired by this. We call it the red wave. So it looks like in 2020. That's the trend that I'm seeing. And then maybe like UMNO might get a bit. It's the other parties actually, the GRS party, parties like PBS or even STAR. They might be on a decline because they're not really linked to the power that be in the federal government. Yeah, that's all.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nid, for that, Philip, and also to Arnold. James said, I think he said his laptop is malfunction or something. Now, before I ask probably towards the final question, I do have somebody here called Dr. Teo, who is very active in the whole Stop the Chop movement in Sarawak, and also in the UK. There are a lot of things that they are trying to achieve here. And I really like, yes.
Can I, James has a suggestion actually. James message, he said, was going to suggest that we ask Jayum to answer his own question. So maybe before you ask that question, we ask Jayum to answer his question.
Yeah, go ahead. Why not? Since it's the current thing. Go ahead. Jayum, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the space. I think the Malaysian, especially people in Sabah and Sarawak, have to thank the Peninsular Malay for giving them this new political reality, and that is the Malay in Semenanjung split between 3 major political parties, and that is the one that gave way to more democratization, which is what we are seeing today. I mean, the government could have been formed by Anwar. Of course, he formed it. It could have been formed by Mahyudin Yassin also. So that is all the possibility. Any bloc that can draw 1/12 and above has that opportunity. So the game is not yet finished. Yeah. So for now, Anwar Pakatan Harapan wins. But I see this as a process of democratization which I think will have a very significant impact to Sarawak. I hope it has a significant impact beyond simply strengthening Sarawak, because Sarawak is asking for this, asking for that, so to Sabah. I see this as a new reality that it provides the people of Sarawak more option. It's telling the state government, you better watch out. Look, federal government is doing a great thing. They are negotiating, forming the best government, not dominated by any one particular group that is domineering, that is discriminating, that is also marginalizing certain people. So I think that is the new reality I hope will turn out, because we see unity government. I mean, never mind, somebody doesn't like the word unity government, but whatever it is, this is a coalition government formed by the coming together of a few political party. You can call it unity government, you can call it anything, it doesn't matter. It is still a coalition government of parties coming together that have a majority. Now, I see that's a good thing because you see in Sarawak, Sarawak government has been formed through one dominant factor, that is the PBB. And I think PBB can learn a little bit from what is going on at the national level, that a good government is a government that negotiates between many interests, that will surely bring good, to the country. And I think Sarawak will have a lot to learn from Anwar Ibrahim's government, which is based on negotiating among various factors. I think that's the only thing I want to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much indeed for that contribution, Jayam. Thank you very much indeed. It's always fascinating, the dynamics between James and whoever he knows a lot of people. There's conversation going on as well on WhatsApp. So I'm sorry, I'm smiling. But yes, before I ask the final question, I'd like to invite Dr. Hun Teo, because she reached out to me talking about what they are doing in London, especially in terms of the Stop the Chop campaign in Sarawak. Dr. Teo, are you here? Dr. Teo? I'm not sure she's able to. Looks like probably she's unable to. But if she's unable to, we have about 15 minutes to go. Raymond, before I ask the big question here that was asked, it says here, how do you see view Sabah and Sarawak in 20 years' time? It's a very broad, suitable for closing question. But before going there, is there anything else, Raymond, that needs to be raised?
No, I don't see anything in the chat already. I think that's
okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, it says, it's passed to me here. Sorry, I'm just looking for it again. Make sure I got this right. How do you see Sabah and Sarawak in 20 years' time? More of a closing question, very broad, but all three panels take turn to summarize this, and we close from unless there are more questions. Prof. James, are you still here? Are you still able to join?
Philip raising his hand now.
Okay, Philip, go ahead, Philip. Go ahead first. I like Philip. Go ahead, Philip. Unmute yourself. You're muted. Okay, no, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, hi. Okay, the question is, how do I see Sabah and Sarawak in 20 years? And then I will answer it in only one word. And that's all. Okay, so this is my answer. Independent.
Whoa. Independent. That's such an interesting statement, particularly.
That is treason.
Oh, well, let's not go. Well, it's free speech. We are okay to voice our opinion, and especially in terms of security, in terms of the number of PTIs in Sabah, that's a very, very interesting statement, to say the least. Anybody else? Otherwise, Prof. Arnold, Dr. Arnold?
Yeah, I think with regards to Sabah and the rest, we are going now looking at how our political elites are doing things. I think in 20 years' time, it is not good. That is why I've been saying this to my students, to my audience in the seminar. I think for Sabah, it is good. One thing that is good about Sabah is that we change our government quite regularly. That's good for democracy, like Prof. Jayum said, democratization, right? Which is very, very good. We don't like one leader, we throw him out in the next election and things like that. But what is not good is that this democratization, this change of government, does not go hand in hand with the strengthening and the reforming of our institution. By right, when the more democracy we have, the better the institution should be, the more reform we should be seeing, right? But that is not what we are seeing in Sabah. So I do not think this is going to be good for Sabah. That is why I've always insisted that for Sabah to move forward, we need to have better leaders, young people, progressive ideas to develop Sabah. And for Sarawak, a good prospect for Sarawak. It is just that hopefully the GPS will be more open up to young leaders, to young ideas. Prof. Jayon mentioned about power sharing. More powers are shared with the Dayaks, with other ethnic groups. If they are able to do this, I think Sarawak's future is brighter compared to Sabah.
Wow, indeed, yes. A question just came in from Mr. Farouk. I think I know him. He said, one of the most important points in the Malaysian agreement was the secular status of Sabah and Sarawak. Will Article 161C and 161D of the Federal Constitution be reinstated to reflect this? I'm not sure who will be able to answer this. Maybe again, I don't. Prof. James is no longer able to participate. I think either Philip or Dr. Arnold again. It's a very specific question. Anybody, any takers?
Yeah, I think I can share my thoughts on this. I think in the case of Sarawak, if I'm not mistaken, Sarawak's constitution is very, very secular. If I'm not mistaken, secular in the sense that Sarawak does not have a state religion compared to Sabah. So I think in Sabah we amended our state constitution to put Islam is our official religion, I think, and also to basically to make Bahasa Melayu as our official language, if not mistaken. That is why compared to Sarawak, Sarawak is very, very secular, I would say, constitutionally speaking, and that's the reason why a lot of researchers say to me that one of the things that Sarawak has done right is to, as much as possible, to preserve its constitution, to try to defend MS-63. That's why they did not change the state religion. They were trying to put Bahasa Malaysia at the same level as English. That is why English and Bahasa Melayu can be used interchangeably here in Sarawak. So with that decision, I think a lot of Sarawakans are quite happy with that status quo.
Right. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Renis. And we really envy the name of our premier as well. No longer chief minister. That's a clever name, by the way. If anybody would like to comment on that, it's a fantastic move, because you're not a prime minister, but you're a premier. And what is a premier? Is a prime minister. That can be argued. So it's almost like a fait accompli, I would say, that new title of premier. Any opinion on that? The title of premier? I think it's a fantastic move. I'm not sure if that's somebody biting that. I see that's almost like a fait accompli, calling themselves in the chief minister as a premier, it's a step nearer to a significant autonomy, put it this way. But if nobody going to answer that, that's fine. Now, I think we are another 8 minutes to go. We tried to wrap it up in 2 hours, and think we have covered a lot of grounds, even without Adrian, the former senator, joining us. And I think I'll wrap it up. There's no more question. Now, I
think I see 2 hands up, not Borneo Explorer and Boyd.
Okay. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Boyd. Please, Boyd. I didn't see that. Sorry. I was opened up.
Okay, I hope you can hear me there. It's actually that was my question on how do you see Sabah and Sarawak in 20 years' time. I wanted it to be quite broad a question because I want to get opinion from the panel speakers. By the way, you guys have done really well, and I'm very, very excited about what you said. But there are areas to me that we haven't focused on. Perhaps it's time for another panel discussion, another time for the Borneo Forum. When you talk about economy, how do we deal with that? What kind of level should we look at? Because there are critical areas now, assuming that post GE15, we are now able to be more confident in ourselves as Sabahans, the Sarawakians, to move to the next things, i.e., how do we address the economy? Federally, of course, looking at that, but how do we in Sabah do that? Because it involves our people, our young people especially, staying put in our state rather than going to West Malaysia or even further afield to find jobs and a better life. So I'm more interested in that kind of situation. I know that it's a debate that's quite late now, but I just want the panel to know that these are such important factors that we need to consider and think about more carefully, because eventually, and I like, by the way, Philip, I like your comments about the dinosaur bit, because the leaders are what we have at the moment are, to me, such dinosaurs, and we definitely need better leaders. In my view, the ones we have now have been in there forever, and we need them to move on. We respect them and we like them, but it's time to have new people. There are a lot, like you guys are talking about, a lot of new people, young people who are very interested. And actually, you're talking about other countries, the heads of government are younger in that relatively. So you're talking about 30s, even 40s. So these are new things that we need to grapple with and to understand. So in my view, in 20 years' time, yes, definitely, I'm looking forward to some form of independence of self-government. 2, in terms of bringing new faces and new leaders, because that's how we do that. The tried and tested people that we have are dinosaurs, definitely. And I respect them because a lot of them are related to us, but even for family reasons. But we need to move on. We need a new Sabah people, if you like, that can lead us further into new areas. So I'm looking forward to that and making something better for ourselves. We can, Sabah in this case I'm talking about, we can be on par or even better than KL. In fact, we are helping them to be better. So this is another debate for another time. So gentlemen, it's a great debate, but Ken, that is more or less my closing remarks for this event, because it's, to me, a lot more to discuss and talk about at another time. But with respect to everyone, thank you so much to the panel for such a great exchange and discussion. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Boyd. Thank you very much indeed. I saw your question, but there's another hands up there. North Borneo Explorer, go ahead. Is that?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Yeah.
Oh, hello there.
North Borneo Explorer is actually my email. My name is Anwar Ghani. I'm from Kota Kinabalu. Very interesting listening to everybody. You raised the point about Sarawak changing its constitution to change from chief minister to premier, right? Along the same lines, you got to also think that Sabah has a right to amend its constitution to change the official religion to Islam. Okay? Because if you respect one, you got to respect the other. The other thing I like to say is about political dinosaurs in the system. You must not forget that within the new government, their new leaders who have only been in power for 2 years. Okay, and these people, you got to see how they perform first. I think before you put everybody to oblivion. You know, some of them, the new ones, they're doing their best, and they have plenty of plans to develop the state. And I think we should just watch and analyze what they're doing. That's all I got to say. Hey, Philip.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much. Thank you for that comment. Anything
Anwar, I
else?
didn't recognize you. Like, look different. The angle like.
Yeah. I'm at a very relaxed angle here.
Bah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, okay, thank you very much for the question. And we just have another 2 minutes to go. Now, I traveled for 3 months from KK Tawau, Tarakan, Nunukan, Samarinda, and importantly, I spent some time in Balikpapan just to gauge this whole Nusantara new development. Very fascinating. I was actually received by several local leaders, which even the local sultan and all that was very, very exciting without being anybody. And they received me really, really politely, and even opened up this whole visit to the Titik Nol, which is not allowed publicly at that time, but they managed to get me to get into to see the Titik Nol, or the point zero of the Nusantara new city. Now, the reason I raised that is because I think I'd like to have your thoughts on how do you see the whole Borneo now with Nusantara, the new city, going to be a massive city in Borneo. And I see that's going to be a drawing force for Sabah Sarawakian to go there, do business, study, and holiday even. So, and all the pan-Borneo roads, and pointing to the fact that we possibly could be more integrated with Borneo in a way of economic and social and cultural, not necessarily political. And do you all see that's a good thing, or is that you think it's a problem? Do you think that's is something that we should really embrace? Obviously, economically, by all means, but some people politically say they are too big, they could dominate us. Have your thoughts here, Philip or Arnold, and anyone else, as a closing question.
Okay, I'll answer very quickly. Will it happen, Nusantara? It seems it might or might not happen. Itu saja.
Okay. I think it will happen. Go ahead. Add somebody else.
Can I say something?
Sure. Go ahead.
Nusantara needs 34 billion to develop itself, right? It is 50 times bigger than Putrajaya. Now, like you, I also was given the privilege of entering into Titik Nol back in July. They welcomed me with open arms, and then I had a chance to attend one of their festivals and all that. But the problem with Nusantara now, while it is Jokowi's legacy, the thing is that there are no takers to lend him the 34 billion to build the capital. The other thing about connectivity and relationship with Kalimantan is this, right? When I was in Kalimantan, I made presentation to the PEMPROF, Pemerintah Provinsi, right? It's a U-shaped table where they have all 15 departments listening to you and your proposals and your project or whatever. And the thing is that during one of the sessions, one of the questions raised to me, they asked me, what's wrong with you people? You know, we build a road to link up to right up to the border in Simangaris, which connects to Serudong and Kalabakan since 2010, before the breakup of Kalimantan Timur to Kalimantan Timur and Kalimantan Utara. That was a invitation to come and link up. You know, he said it's been 12 years now. You guys have not done anything. On the Kalimantan side, the Simangaris side, the road is still. On the Malaysia side, you need fully equipped off-road vehicles to cross through. I've been through that border 3 times, and each time, depending on the weather, is tough. You know, so there's a lot of things which we need to settle to with the Kalimantan government. For instance, right, our people in Sabah can help to open up the business community entry into Kalimantan. How they can do that is to create goodwill. How do you create goodwill? You help them by exposing Kalimantan, the whole of Kalimantan or just parts of Kalimantan to the rest of the world. Why? Because right now, hitherto, up to now, the sun has been shining on Sabah, Borneo, Brunei, and Sarawak. But Kalimantan is the dark side, where the sun never shines. Okay? So the thing is, if you go there, you realize that while Kalimantan is huge, it is 7.6 times bigger than Sabah, which is 9.8% of Borneo. Brunei is 0.8% of Borneo. Sarawak is 13% of Borneo, leaving 76.4% of the island of Borneo to Kalimantan. Right? They're huge, but their very size works against them because they have a lot of attractions, but the attractions are far in between. You know, you require 8 hours to travel, for instance, like Tanjung Redep to Labuan Cermin. 8 hours. Ding Dong Road worse than the road to Sandakan. And then you require 13 hours to travel from Labuan Cermin to Samarinda. So the thing is, their tourism industry is relatively underdeveloped. So they're not going to pose a threat to us in Sabah, where tourism is compact. Within half an hour, we have a tourism attraction. You know what I mean? So you go from KK, you go to Inanam, from Inanam, you go to Kulu, you go to Kinabalu Park, Kinabalu Park, you go to Poring, you go to Telupit, and then you go to Sandakan. All the maximum time is 2.5 to 3 hours. So our tourism industry will flourish. So they're not our competitors insofar as tourism is concerned. So why don't we help? Why doesn't the tourism authorities in Sabah, for instance, do what it can to help them, connect them to the rest of the world, knowing very well that they are not a competitor to us in that industry, but at the same time create goodwill, which will open up the rest of the businessmen, Chinese, and for instance, the Kinabalu, Kadazan, Dusun Chamber of Commerce, which allows them entry through the goodwill and do business in that area, which is 7.5 times bigger than Sabah. You know, so anyway, maybe another session we can talk more.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Anybody else would like to add on that? Otherwise, I think we call it the day. And if nobody else want to say, Richard Punai, one of our VP as well. If you would like to say a few words before we finish the forum. Are you there, Richard? Richard has been it's been very, very instrumental in organizing. He's the guy behind the scene, making sure everything's happened as well. Thank you, Richard. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you all the panelists and Raymond and Ken. Congratulations on another wonderful forum for us. Just want to say I'm looking forward to see Sabah again, hopefully next year. And I appreciate all this information, and I hope we'll be able to continue working together as one people, especially in Sabah, if not in Borneo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Richard, for all your hard work behind the scene. He's one of our VP. And let me wrap up again. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, for staying on. We got it just within 2 hours. That's fine. Thank you, Raymond, for co-hosting. Thank you, Boyd, and especially thank you for all the speakers, Prof. James, Dr. Arnold, and Philip. Again, thank you so much for giving us the privilege and access to your knowledge as well. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening, the rest of the evening on a Thursday. And Merry Christmas, of course, to everybody, and Happy New Year as well. See you next year. Next year, the format is changing. We only have four big, it's called multi-panel forums, and most of the other 8 months will be a one-to-one called Borneo Talks. So just because of the response that we get, organizing a monthly multi-panel forum is so much more demanding, and a Borneo Talks will be led by Richard, and I think that's going to be very, very exciting, more of a podcast style, and we can interview and make prominent unsung heroes in Borneo who've done a lot of things for Borneo. Thank you very much again, and take care. Merry Christmas. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We didn't take a picture, huh? Can somebody take a picture? Hang on. Okay. Oh wow, wow, wow. Take a picture. Take a picture. Take a picture. Can you take a picture?
Richard.
Richard, anyone? Okay, we're finishing. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you screenshot, Richard? Thank you very much again. I'm just gonna screenshot now. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much again. Thank you very much, Neat. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's done. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, for Johan. Oh, Prof. Johan is here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Johan, thank you.